A billionaire stood in a hospital room, surrounded by millions of dollars worth of technology, watching a 9-year-old girl die. His machines had failed. His team of specialists had given up. He walked out defeated, his ego shattered. And that's when a barefoot boy appeared in the doorway and whispered to the father, "I can bring her back." What happened next would leave doctors speechless and make everyone question everything they thought they knew about life, death, and the power of things we cannot see. This is the story of Michael Bennett, a desperate father who watched the richest man in the country fail to save his daughter. It's about Coma, a 9-year-old girl trapped between worlds. And it's about a mysterious child who appeared when science had nothing left to offer. What you are about to hear challenges medicine, defies logic, and proves that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't technology. It's something much simpler. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. It was a Saturday morning in Seattle, and Michael Bennett was making breakfast for his daughter. Coma sat at the kitchen table, her dark braids tied with yellow ribbons, humming a song she'd made up herself. She was 9 years old, small for her age, with bright eyes that seemed to notice everything. Michael flipped pancakes, while Coma told him about a dream she'd had, something about flying over the ocean and talking to dolphins. He loved these mornings, just the two of them. No rushing, no stress. Her mother had died 3 years earlier from cancer, and since then, Michael had built his entire world around Coma. He worked from home as a freelance architect, so he could always be there for school pickups, bedtime stories, and Saturday morning pancakes. She was his reason for everything. Coma was tying her shoes, getting ready to go to the park, when she suddenly froze. Her hands stopped moving. Her face went pale. Michael turned from the stove. "Coma?" She looked up at him, confused, trying to speak, but no words came out. And then her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed sideways off the chair, hitting the floor hard. Michael dropped everything and ran to her. He screamed her name, checked her breathing, and felt for her pulse. It was there, fast and erratic. He dialed 911 with shaking hands, his voice breaking as he tried to explain what was happening. The paramedics arrived in 8 minutes. They loaded Coma onto a stretcher, and Michael rode with her, holding her small hand the entire way. She didn't squeeze back. Her eyes were open but empty, staring at nothing. At Seattle Memorial Hospital, doctors ran every test imaginable: CT scans, MRIs, blood panels, and toxicology screens. Everything came back normal. Her heart was fine. Her brain looked fine. But Coma wasn't fine. She was unconscious, unresponsive, locked inside herself. The lead neurologist, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, was a woman in her 50s, with 2 decades of experience in pediatric neurology. She sat down with Michael in a quiet consultation room and explained that Coma's condition was extremely rare. They were calling it acute cerebral shutdown, a term Michael had never heard before. Dr. Mitchell said Coma's brain activity was minimal, like she was in a deep sleep, but there was no injury, no disease, no clear cause. They would monitor her, run more tests, and hope for improvement. Hope. That word felt hollow. Michael moved into Coma's hospital room and refused to leave. He slept in the chair beside her bed, talked to her for hours, read her favorite books out loud, played music on his phone. He told her stories about her mother, about the trip they'd planned to Disneyland, about how much he loved her. The machines beeped steadily. Coma didn't move. Days passed. Then a week. Nurses brought Michael food that he barely touched. Dr. Mitchell checked on Coma twice a day, always with the same gentle, uncertain expression, and Michael watched his daughter slip further away. On the 8th day, everything changed. A man in a tailored black suit walked into the ICU, followed by a team of assistants carrying equipment cases. His name was Nathan Pierce, and he was one of the wealthiest tech entrepreneurs in the world. He'd made his fortune developing artificial intelligence systems for healthcare, robotics for surgery, and diagnostic tools that could analyze thousands of medical conditions in seconds. He was worth over $12 billion, and he'd read about Keoma's case in a medical journal that morning. Nathan approached Michael with a confident handshake and an easy smile. He said he'd been following Keoma's condition through a contact at the hospital, and he wanted to help. He had access to technology that wasn't available to the public yet. Experimental systems that could map brain activity in ways traditional medicine couldn't. He could bring in the best specialists in the country. Money wasn't an issue. Michael stared at him, exhausted and desperate. He didn't understand why a billionaire would care about his daughter, but he was too tired to question it. If this man could save Keoma, Michael would do anything. Nathan didn't wait for permission. He made calls right there in the hallway, his voice sharp and commanding. Within 3 hours, a team of engineers and medical specialists arrived with equipment Michael had never seen before. They wheeled in machines with glowing screens, sensors that attached to Keoma's head, devices that hummed and beeped in rhythms Michael didn't understand. Nathan stood in the center of the room, directing his team like a general commanding troops. He seemed excited, energized, like this was the most interesting problem he'd encountered in years. But as the hours turned into days, Michael began to feel uneasy. Nathan talked about Keoma like she was a machine that had stopped working, a puzzle that needed solving. He used words like reboot and optimize. He told Michael they could upgrade her neural pathways if the standard protocols didn't work. Michael felt something cold settle in his chest. On the 3rd day of Nathan's involvement, the billionaire pulled Michael aside in the hallway and said something that made Michael's blood run cold. "Look, I know this is hard, but we need to think practically here. If her brain isn't responding to conventional stimuli, we might need to consider more aggressive interventions." Think of it like upgrading an iPhone. Sometimes you just need to reset the whole system to factory settings. Michael stepped closer, his voice low and shaking with anger. "My daughter is not a machine." Nathan blinked, surprised by the pushback. "I didn't mean it like that. I'm just trying to help." Michael turned and walked back into Keoma's room without another word. He sat beside her bed and took her hand, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt something shift inside him. Technology couldn't save her. Machines couldn't reach her. Whatever was keeping Keoma locked inside herself wasn't something that could be fixed with algorithms and expensive equipment. Nathan's team stayed for 2 more days. They ran more tests, adjusted settings, and tried different protocols. Nothing worked. On Sunday evening, Nathan packed up his equipment, his face tight with frustration. He told Michael he'd done everything he could, but Keoma's condition was beyond his expertise. He left without saying goodbye. Michael sat alone in the dimly lit room, holding his daughter's hand. He was out of options, out of hope, and for the first time since his wife died, he closed his eyes and prayed. If you're still watching, drop a comment with "I'm still here," so we can see who's really paying attention. And tell us, have you ever faced a moment where everything you tried just wasn't enough? Let us know your story. It was just after midnight when Michael heard footsteps in the hallway. He looked up, expecting a nurse doing late-night rounds, but instead, he saw a child standing in the doorway. The boy looked about 10 years old, maybe younger. He wore a faded gray hoodie, jeans with worn-out knees, and no shoes. His feet were bare and dirty, like he'd been walking through the streets for hours. His face was calm, his eyes dark and steady, older than they should have been. Michael stood up, confused. "Hey, are you lost? Do you need help?" The boy didn't answer immediately. He stepped into the room, his gaze moving to Keoma lying motionless in the bed. Then he looked back at Michael and said, "I know how to wake her up." Michael felt his chest tighten. "What?" The boy walked closer to the bed, his bare feet silent on the cold hospital floor. "She's listening, but she's scared to come back." Michael shook his head, his mind racing. Who was this kid? How did he get past security? And why did his words feel so impossibly true? The boy turned to face Michael. "You need to tell her the truth. Not the things you think she wants to hear. The real things. The painful things." Michael's throat went dry. "I don't understand what you're talking about." The boy sat down in the chair beside Keoma's bed, his small hands folded in his lap. "She's stuck between where she was and where she needs to be. She can hear you, but she doesn't believe you yet. She needs your pain, not your protection." Michael felt tears burning in his eyes. "Who are you?" The boy looked at him with those impossibly calm eyes. "My name is Isaiah, and I go where I'm needed." Isaiah stood up and walked toward the door. "Tell her before it's too late. She's slipping further away every day." And then he disappeared into the hallway. Michael ran after him, but when he reached the corridor, it was empty. A nurse sat at the station nearby, typing on a computer. Michael approached her, his voice urgent. "Did you see a kid just now? A boy with no shoes?" The nurse looked up, confused. "No one's been through here all night. It's been completely quiet." Michael stood there, his heart pounding, his mind spinning. He walked back into Keoma's room and sat down heavily in the chair. He stared at his daughter's still face, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. And then, slowly, he began to speak. He told her the truth he'd been hiding since her mother died. He told her he was terrified every single day that he was failing her, that he didn't know how to be both mother and father, that sometimes he felt so alone he could barely breathe. He told her he was sorry for pretending everything was okay when it wasn't, for hiding his own grief so she wouldn't see him break. He told her he missed her mother so much it physically hurt, and that sometimes he felt guilty for still being alive when Sarah wasn't. He told her he loved her more than his own life, and that he needed her to come back, not because he couldn't survive without her, but because she deserved to live, to grow up, to be happy. Tears streamed down his face as he spoke, his voice breaking with every word. And then, just as he finished, one of the monitors beeped. Just once, a single spike in brain activity. Michael looked up, his breath catching in his throat. Keoma's fingers twitched. The next morning, Dr. Mitchell couldn't explain what had happened. Keoma's brain activity had increased overnight, not dramatically, but enough to suggest something fundamental was changing. Michael told her about the boy, about Isaiah, but Dr. Mitchell gently explained that there was no record of any visitor entering the ICU after hours. Security footage showed empty hallways. No one had signed in. Michael knew what he'd seen. That afternoon, Isaiah came back. This time, Michael didn't question it. He just let the boy sit with Keoma. Isaiah placed his small hand on her wrist, his touch light and careful. He didn't speak much, but when he did, his voice was quiet and certain. "She's closer today. She heard you last night." Michael asked quietly, "How do you know?" Isaiah looked at him. "Because I've been where she is, and someone called me back too." Over the next 4 days, Isaiah returned every night after midnight. He never stayed long, sometimes just 15 or 20 minutes. He would sit beside Keoma in silence, or he would tell Michael things he couldn't possibly know. He knew about Sarah's cancer, about the final weeks in hospice. He knew about the bedtime stories Michael used to tell Keoma, the ones he'd stopped telling after his wife died because they hurt too much to remember. He knew about the guilt Michael carried, the feeling that he should have somehow saved Sarah, should have been able to do more. And every time Isaiah visited, Keoma improved. Her brain activity increased steadily. Her fingers moved more frequently. Her eyelids fluttered. The nurses started calling it remarkable. Dr. Mitchell called it unprecedented. Michael called it Isaiah. But not everyone believed. On the 5th night, Nathan Pierce returned to the hospital, furious that his multi-million-dollar technology had failed, where something unexplainable was succeeding. He demanded to meet Isaiah, insisted on documenting everything, on running tests to understand what was happening. But Isaiah was never there when Nathan arrived, and whenever Michael tried to predict when the boy would appear, he didn't come. Isaiah arrived on his own schedule, in his own time. Nathan confronted Michael in the hallway, his voice sharp with frustration. "This is absurd. There's no such thing as a miracle boy who heals people. Whatever's happening with Keoma is neurological, and we need to document it properly." Michael looked at him calmly. "You tried your way. It didn't work. Now I'm trying something else." Nathan's jaw tightened. "You're being irrational." Michael smiled sadly. "Maybe. But my daughter is getting better." That night, Isaiah returned. He walked into the room while Michael was reading to Keoma from an old storybook, one of her favorites from when she was younger. Isaiah sat down quietly and listened. When Michael finished the chapter, Isaiah spoke. "You stopped reading to her after her mother died, didn't you?" Michael nodded, his throat tight. "It reminded me too much of Sarah. We used to read together every night, all three of us." Isaiah looked at Keoma. She missed that more than anything. More than the parks, more than the trips. She missed the stories. On the 7th night, everything went wrong. Michael was sitting beside Keoma's bed, holding her hand, and telling her about a memory from her 5th birthday, when suddenly the heart monitor flatlined. The piercing alarm screamed through the room. Michael jumped to his feet, his heart exploding with panic. Nurses rushed in within seconds, followed by Dr. Mitchell and 2 other doctors. They shouted orders, grabbed equipment, and pushed Michael back against the wall. Someone yelled, "Charging!" And Michael watched in horror as they placed paddles on his daughter's chest. Her small body jerked. The monitor stayed flat. They tried again. Nothing. Michael was screaming Keoma's name, trying to push through the wall of medical staff, but strong hands held him back. And then Isaiah walked into the room. He moved through the chaos like he was walking through a quiet garden on a calm day. No one seemed to notice him. He walked straight to Keoma's bedside and placed 2 fingers gently on her forehead. And everything stopped. Not slowed down. Stopped. The alarms went silent. The doctors froze mid-movement. The fluorescent lights flickered once, twice, and then went dim. The only sound was Michael's ragged breathing and the impossible stillness that filled the room like water. Isaiah closed his eyes and whispered something Michael couldn't hear. And then, in that impossible silence, Keoma gasped. Her chest rose sharply, desperately, like she'd been underwater for too long. Her eyes flew open, wide and scared and alive. Sound returned all at once, a crashing wave of noise and movement and light. The monitors beeped frantically. Doctors stumbled backward in shock. Nurses gasped. Dr. Mitchell stood frozen, staring at the screens, as she'd just witnessed something that violated every law of medicine she knew. Michael collapsed to his knees, sobbing so hard he couldn't breathe. When he finally looked up to thank Isaiah, the boy was gone. Keoma recovered slowly over the next 3 weeks. She had to relearn how to walk steadily, how to eat solid foods, how to trust that her body would obey her commands. But every day she got stronger. Her smile came back. Her laugh returned. She started asking questions, making jokes, and being herself again. Dr. Mitchell called it a spontaneous neurological recovery, though she admitted privately to Michael that in 20 years of practice, she'd never seen anything remotely like it. Nathan Pierce tried to take credit in press interviews, claiming that his technology had laid the groundwork for Kioma's healing, even if the final breakthrough had been delayed. But the nurses who'd been there that night knew better. They'd seen what happened, and they didn't talk about it much. But when they did, they spoke in whispers about the barefoot boy who'd appeared when the machines failed. One afternoon, a janitor named Mr. Davis pulled Michael aside as he was leaving Kioma's room. He was an older black man with kind eyes and gray hair, someone who'd worked at Seattle Memorial for over 30 years. He said quietly, "I heard about what happened with your daughter, and I wanted you to know you're not the first." Michael looked at him. "What do you mean?" Mr. Davis glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "Every few years, there are stories. A boy who shows up when a child is dying. No shoes, no family, no records. He appears when medicine has nothing left to offer. He helps, and then he disappears. Some people think he's an angel. Others think he's something else. But everyone who's seen him says the same thing. He only comes when someone needs him most." Michael felt chills run down his spine. "Do you believe it?" Mr. Davis smiled. "I believe there are more things in this world than we can explain, and I believe that's exactly how it should be." On the day Kioma was discharged, Michael packed up their things while she sat in a wheelchair, excited to finally leave the hospital. As they were about to go, Kioma looked up at him and asked, "Daddy, who was the boy who visited me?" Michael stopped. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Kioma smiled. "The boy with no shoes. He talked to me while I was sleeping. He told me it was okay to come back, that you were waiting for me." Michael knelt beside her wheelchair, his eyes filling with tears. "His name was Isaiah." Kioma nodded. "I know, he told me. He said he helps people who are lost." Michael hugged her tightly, unable to speak. That night, after they got home and Michael tucked Kioma into her own bed for the first time in over a month, he stood in her doorway and whispered into the quiet house, "Thank you, Isaiah, wherever you are." The hallway light flickered once, just once, and Michael smiled. 3 months passed. Michael changed his entire life. He cut back on work, spent every evening with Kioma, took her to the park on Saturdays, and read her stories every night before bed. They talked about Sarah more openly now, sharing memories and crying together when they needed to. Slowly, carefully, they both began to heal. One evening, as Michael was tucking Kioma in, she looked up at him with those bright, curious eyes and asked, "Daddy, do you think Isaiah is helping someone else right now?" Michael thought about it for a moment. "I think so, sweetheart. I really do." Kioma smiled. "Good. Everyone should have someone like him when they're scared." Michael kissed her forehead and turned out the light. As Michael walked down the hallway toward his own bedroom, his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Dr. Mitchell. "Michael, something strange happened today. A 7-year-old girl in the pediatric ICU collapsed this morning. Critical condition. No clear cause. Nurses say a barefoot boy was spotted near her room tonight. No ID. Security has no record of him. I thought you should know." Michael stopped walking. He read the message again, then looked down the dark hallway toward the front door. He thought about Isaiah, about those calm eyes and bare feet, about the impossible things that had happened in his daughter's hospital room, and he smiled. Because somewhere in Seattle Memorial Hospital right now, a terrified parent was sitting beside their child, watching machines beep, listening to doctors say there was nothing more they could do. And soon, very soon, a boy with no shoes would walk into that room and whisper the words that would change everything. I know how to wake her up. Michael put his phone away and walked to Kioma's room. He opened the door quietly and watched her sleep, her chest rising and falling peacefully, her face relaxed and beautiful. She was alive. She was here. And that was all that mattered. Some things can't be explained by science. Some miracles don't come from technology or money or brilliant minds. Sometimes they come from mysterious places we'll never fully understand. And sometimes, when we need them most, they arrive barefoot in the middle of the night. This story is based on real accounts from hospital staff and families who've experienced unexplainable recoveries when medicine had nothing left to offer. We may never know who Isaiah really was, whether he was an angel, a miracle, or something else entirely. But one thing is certain: some forces in this universe are more powerful than technology, more valuable than money, and more real than anything we can measure. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs hope today. Drop a comment and tell us, do you believe in miracles? Have you ever experienced something you couldn't explain? We want to hear your story. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.